This atheist makes a wild claim about the moral character of Jesus, but it backfires when he's pressed on where he gets his standard of morality from by Frank Turek. We're going to let this interaction play out, but I'm just going to interject for a minute or so to clear up this atheist misconception about Jesus. But I'll leave chapters and timestamps here and in the description in case you want to skip ahead. But make sure you stick around to the end to see how Frank seems to change this atheist's mind about God.
Hi, I'm Kyle.
Hey, Kyle.
I'm an atheist.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Of course. I love hearing these kind of debates and stuff. You asked why would you be an atheist if you possibly might know if God exists? My answer to that question is simple. It's just the fact that there's so many terrible things in the Bible. Like at one point, Jesus says to one of his disciples, "It's great that they're torturing their slaves here, but only lightly. Even though they did nothing wrong, it's great that they're doing it." He doesn't give any reason to why he says that he doesn't do anything. I don't understand why you would want to follow such a God. My question to you is why you would follow such a God.
Okay, let's not even look at the context of that passage. Let's just assume what you said is 100% true. Okay? As an atheist, why is that wrong?
Frank makes a smart move here when he immediately recognizes the atheist's inconsistency when he makes the moral claim that Jesus was bad. However, he has no objective moral standard to ground his morality as an atheist. But in Frank doing this, he grants the atheist premise that Jesus commanded the torture of slaves. If you've read the Gospels, you're probably thinking, I don't remember reading that. So I looked it up to see what possibly he could be referring to. And that's when I found the atheist website that were talking about Luke 12:42-48, which guess what? Says nothing like what he claimed. Jesus in this passage is not giving instructions to his disciples on how to punish slaves. It is clearly a parable, as Peter mentions in verse 41. A parable is simply a story or a literary device, commonly used by Jesus to convey some type of greater theological truth. In short, this parable speaks of a master who represents God and his servants who represent us. The master has left his servants to rule over his household whilst he's gone, just like how God has left us to take care of his world. We see in verses 43 and 44 that the servant doing his master's will is blessed and will be rewarded with his master's possessions. This is analogous to the rewards that we will attain in heaven for following God's will here on earth. However, in verses 45 and 46, we see the servant who's violent to others, who's greedy and gets drunk, will be punished. And lastly, in 47 and 48, we read how the servant who knew his master's will, but did not get ready or act according to his will receive a severe beating. But the one who did not know and did what deserved a beating will receive a light beating. Everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required. And from him to whom they entrusted much, they will demand the more. So if you read those last two verses like this atheist likely did, without its surrounding context, you may be able to see how he got confused and came to the conclusion he did. But what he didn't understand is that this parable is actually about the accountability and responsibility to God and to others whilst we're here on earth, in addition to the consequences of living an unrighteous life contrary to the will of God. You see, if God trusts you with the knowledge of his revelation and his word, yet you fail to follow his will, then you will be punished more severely than the person who doesn't have that same moral knowledge and then doesn't follow his will. So therefore, an unbeliever who has never read the Bible will receive a lighter punishment than the one who has come judgment day. And the reason why you still get some punishment, even if you've never read the Bible, is because God has written the moral law on our hearts. Therefore, we're all still accountable to him and to follow his will and act in a moral way. So ultimately, this parable demonstrates how Jesus is actually a perfectly just and fair judge and in no way impugns on his perfect moral character, like the atheist claimed. It simply comes down to a misunderstanding of the context and the intention of the passage. Now back to Frank Turek.
Let's not even look at the context of that passage. Let's just assume what you said is 100% true. Okay? As an atheist, why is that wrong?
Why is that wrong?
Yeah.
Morally, I would think that each and every human being here is the same. We all have the same rights. We all have the same wants and needs. I think we all should do the same. I think that we should, especially the God that we should follow, should have higher expectations of knowing such a thing.
Okay, but you seem to be assuming that certain things are really right and people have certain rights, even if there is no God. How do you justify that? What's your standard of rightness?
My standard of rightness would be a fair society.
What do you mean by fair?
Fair. Everything is equal. I personally, I have nothing wrong. I find nothing wrong with a communistic state. That's just my opinion. I don't think it's something you can be afraid of. Everybody seems to be afraid of it.
Okay.
In the United States at least. But that's just my thought of fairness, is the idea that all humans should be the same. We all
Okay, so it's your thought of fairness. What if Hitler has a different idea of fairness? Is he wrong?
He's not wrong.
Hitler's not wrong.
He is not, well, in a kind of idea that we all have our own opinions. I feel like we should take the utilitarian view and go with what is best for the most amount of us.
Okay, but what do you mean by best?
What would mean the greatest positives for the most amount of people?
Okay, but you're assuming that you're assuming there's a best out there. You're assuming a moral law. Where does that moral law come from if there's no God?
Moral law. I personally just think that human beings should be able to make up their own laws. I mean, each people in time have found their own moral laws, and I think that they become better and better over time.
Better, but you wouldn't even know what better was unless you knew what best was. So I'm asking you, what is your standard of best to say that certain people are closer to the best or better than others? What's the standard? Is it just your opinion, or is there something beyond your opinion which says this is good?
Well, I mean, we've all heard about utopias and a perfect society and things like that. That would be great in a way, but also we've all seen like the books like Huxley's, I believe, I forget what it's called, but he makes a book on this perfect
world?
society.
Yes. Okay, yeah.
It's that perfect society that everybody's perfect, there's no murder, there's no any of that.
Okay, but the question is, and maybe I'm just not stating it properly, what's wrong with murder if there's no God? Why shouldn't I kill other people to get what I want if there's no God?
Because it doesn't help society.
Why do I care about society?
Because we as a group should worry about society. We should be making the betterment of ourselves.
But Kyle, you're importing a moral law into a frame that has no moral law. As an atheist, you're trying to say there is no God, which means there is no standard of rightness out there. But I'm saying this is my personal standard of rightness, which would mean somebody else could come along like Hitler or Stalin and say, Kyle, if there's no standard beyond neither you or me, then I can do whatever I want, including killing you to get what you have.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point. I can see where you're coming from. I don't think that God is needed in a sense I'm not looking for perfection. I don't think anybody here is. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for human beings just to simply work together to better society. I don't really see that need for a perfect identity up above. I don't.
Okay, I mean, I'm not saying that an atheist can't be a good person. I'm not saying atheists don't know right from wrong. That's not my point. My point is that it seems to me it's difficult to justify what rightness is if everything is reduced to human opinion. Which human gets to decide, right? It's subjective then, as Levi was saying before, it's just in my subjective mind. If there's not an external referent to say that this is good and this is evil, then we're all just here and we're fending for ourselves. Now, a lot of people will say, and I appreciate your question, it's a very good question. A lot of people will say, well, we need to cooperate to get along, right? Actually, that's not true. Take somebody like Stalin. He cooperated with very few people, just his henchmen, and he killed 20 million people to get what he wanted. And then he died on his deathbed at the age of 74, shaking his fist at God one last time. He never paid for his sins on this life. Okay? So the problem, it seems to me, is we know, and you know right, you know what's right and wrong, and I know it too, and I don't need to believe in God to know that. I just need there to be a God to justify it. Let me put it this way. A lot of atheists say, look, I know right from wrong, and I agree with you know right from wrong. But that's like saying, I can know what a book says and deny there's an author, which is true. But there would be no book to read unless there was an author. The same is true when it comes to morality. You can know what the right thing to do is and deny there's a God, but there would be no right thing to do unless there was a God. That makes sense?
I guess I can see your point, yes.
So as we just saw, the atheist in just 5 minutes went from condemning Jesus to the start of coming to the realization that objective morality is actually good evidence that God exists. As I explained with the earlier example, the moral outrage that many atheists have for the Bible usually amounts to a simple misunderstanding of the context. And upon a further examination of their atheist ethical philosophy, atheists like this gentleman start to realize that they may have been mistaken about this the whole time. But what I liked about this guy is he came with a humble heart, genuinely seeking truth, and Jesus claimed that he is the truth. I'm convinced that seeking the truth earnestly and following the evidence where it leads you will inevitably lead you to Jesus. In John 14:6, he said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me." So if you're wondering if there's life after death and you're on your journey to seeking truth, then I would encourage you to keep seeking it, because Jesus promises those who seek the truth, you will find it. But look, my name's Ollie J, and my goal is to help you better understand the gospel so you can walk confidently in the Christian faith. And if you're still not convinced, I would encourage you to click the video right here. So until next time, God bless you in Jesus' glorious name.